From the heartland of America, focused on God, family, and country, the mouthpiece of the Midwest. This is Dale Carter's America.
Welcome back to our podcast. We got a lot to talk about today and a very special guest. We want to thank Bob Watson for being involved in our podcast. He is our local State Farm agent. He's been my State Farm agent for nearly 30 years. He's been helping folks in eastern Jackson County, actually in both Missouri and Kansas, for 50 years. Just celebrated his 50th anniversary. So if you need insurance, and we all do, maybe it's time to get a rate quote. State Farm, surprisingly great rates, especially when you bundle home and car insurance. And Bob Watson should be your first call on insurance. Let him take a look at what you have at 816-229-7878. Auto, home, life, they can insure anything. They can insure your pets these days. He's at 7th and Main in Blue Springs, but don't let his office location limit you. Kansas and Missouri, he's licensed in both. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Kurt's back with me, and we talk about all the different ways that you can subscribe so that you never miss an episode of Dale Carter's America.
Hi. How's everybody doing? Comment below, say, hi, I'm doing well, or hi, I'm doing terrible. No, we appreciate you watching. You can find us on YouTube and Rumble for the video podcast, audio only on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. And make sure you follow us on Facebook as well. We've had some really great engagement the past couple weeks. Lots of comments, lots of people chipping in, so we really appreciate it. And if you're already listening to this, then you've already done your part. But we would love to convert some more of those people who are liking and commenting our posts to actually watching the podcast. So hopefully, make sure you're sharing the podcast as well, not just our posts. We really appreciate you.
And spread the word,
Yes.
especially as we get closer to this presidential election where it's going to be very important that we're talking about facts and things that matter, like boring old policy things, not necessarily just the Carnival show. Although we'll have fun with the Carnival show. We poke fun at everything and all sides, as you'll find out in today's episode. Make sure you're spreading the word so that folks will jump on board here. You are our best marketing tool. So get out there and get it done.
I will say, too, one more thing about that. We are sort of limited. We've tried advertising a little bit before, and we could probably find ways around it and find ways to do it. But, we have very little money to do so. And Facebook in particular is very strict about, sponsoring and advertising for political things like podcasts and stuff like that. So it's pretty difficult to get around that. So that's why we need your help. The organic reach is what really helps us.
And we know that a lot of you are listening and watching the podcast when Bob Watson has a 50th anniversary event. We have another event coming up that's not necessarily the podcast, but I will be there. And it's hard to separate me from the podcast, especially when it comes to backing the blue and backing our firefighters. My friend at Hero Fund USA, he was on last week's episode, Daryl Smith. Their big fundraiser and event is going on as we appreciate our first responders. It's First Responder Appreciation Day this Saturday at Moley Toyota. It is on 103rd Street, just north of I-435. We're going to have a great time there. All kinds of classic fire trucks and police cars and the current stuff that they use as well. Drones that you have paid for through Hero Fund USA. They'll be on display there. Canine demonstration, face painting, food, free lunch. Who doesn't like a free lunch?
Dale, are you going to get your face painted?
I might. What should I have on it? I'm not going to give you that kind of latitude. I don't know. We'll see. My friends Jerry Kaler and Kent Edmondson are going to be grilling the hot dogs that are supplied by Price Chopper. I think we're going to have brats and chips and drinks and all that. And kids love fire trucks and police cars. It's just a great time to come out, shake hands with some of those police officers, and thank them for what they do. They're going to raffle off one of those e-bikes.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and they're only going to sell 250 of the raffle tickets. So you'll have a really good chance to win that if you buy a raffle ticket, and all the proceeds will go to Hero Fund USA.
That's worth it just in itself. Those e-bikes are pretty cool, and they're expensive. I mean, they're like $3-4 grand minimum.
HeroFundUSA.org is the website that Kurt's kind of scrolling through right there. You can find out all the good works that they do. They stand in the gap, and there is a gap. Trust me, as a former city official, I know this. There is a gap between what the departments need and what can be funded. Is that my picture out there? What's that all about?
It's on the website.
Did I sign a release on that? I'm not sure I did. All right.
Yeah,
fine.
it's just a little, grainy.
Yeah, just kidding. I'm just kidding. Daryl's a dear friend of mine, and this is going to be a fun event coming up on Saturday. We ready for our special guest?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yep, he's an attorney in the Kansas City area, also has many other credentials, including being a former prosecutor with the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office. Mr. Phil LeVota is joining us. We have special guest Phil LeVota with us. Phil, thank you so much for coming back.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
I mean, a second time means, we were impressed with you the first time around, right?
Okay, I'm not sure that that's good or bad, but glad to be here.
We had you on the podcast once before. It was after what happened February 14th with the shooting at Union Station and all that. And I think you carved that thing up perfectly. And as we were talking before we got in here, I think sometimes we get into an echo chamber where we say the same things to each other because, we think many of the same things. So what we're trying to do, especially with you, is bring in an outsider's perspective, maybe who doesn't think like us 100%.
I'm glad to be here. I don't know if you know, about 10 or 15 years ago, I used to do a show on KCMO radio. It was me and Jeff Rowe. You remember Jeff Rowe, who was a local political guy. Now he's the biggest guy doing national politics.
Yeah.
And Chris DeGaulle was the host. So it's called the Monday Morning Matchup.
Love Chris.
And he's great. Now, it was supposed to be Chris was the mediator, but every Monday morning they both ganged up on me.
Exactly.
But to your point, it was great to be able to spar back and forth and know every Monday we're going to talk and to have these different issues, talking to each other civilly. And we never agreed on everything, but we at least had to have an open dialogue that we talked about every week.
We're not going to agree on everything, and that's fine. That's really what America's all about. When we started this podcast, we started it right after Joe Biden's inauguration. That was the first episode, and I came with a set of principles. I want to share those with you as kind of a jumping off point to our conversation. There are 5 guiding principles to this podcast. One is to tell the truth. And I know the truth is kind of one of those terms. It's like my truth, your truth, or whatever. From our best perspective, at least tell the truth from our side. No name calling or questioning the other side's patriotism. I hear that all the time, and I hate that.
It's easy, and it's not right.
Yeah. 3, we call out hypocrisy wherever it exists. We do a lot of that. 4 is the longest one. We defend the principles of smaller government, strong military, reasonable legal immigration, law and order, and a market-driven capitalistic economy. Is there anything wrong with that?
Everything's right about that.
Okay. And then 5, I unashamedly love my country and will always put it first. Those are the 5 principles we started this podcast with. And we use that as the jumping off point. Now, you would call yourself a Democrat.
I would call myself a moderate Democrat. These times, I actually use the adjective moderate Democrat.
Yeah. And I would call myself, in most cases, a Republican. But what I do in the morning when I get up, I don't say, okay, well, what's Donald Trump say about this? Or what does Mitch McConnell say about this? And then form my opinion. I have my principles that I live by. And it seems to me that more often than not, they're saying things that I agree with.
Correct.
Yeah. So we've gotten to a point in this country where we're just tribal. We're in our tribal cocoons, and if you say that you're a moderate Democrat, you said the D word, well, we can't listen to anything you say.
Oh, it's exactly like even your football teams. You're a Chiefs fan through and through, and anybody that's not a Chiefs fan, you're not with them. So it's important to have different points of view. Now, I come from being a former chairman of the Democratic Party, being involved in every Democratic election campaign for the past 20 years, from city council to governor to president, as a former chairman of the party. And I come as a background as a Jackson County prosecutor for over a decade.
Sure.
And doing that. So that's formed my beliefs and my values. I'm from Independence, so Harry Truman's one of my hometown favorites. And I think Harry Truman was the epitome of what I believe the Democratic Party is about. So that's where I come from.
I had Ike Skelton on my show once years ago, and Ike asked who my congressman was. And at the time it was Sam Graves. Now it's Mark Alford. And his reaction was, oh boy, good luck with that. And to me, that's tribal, because I don't know that there's a lot of difference between where Ike Skelton was and where Sam Graves is.
No, I don't, but there'd be some differences we could figure out.
Yeah.
But Congressman Alford was a friend of mine. I spoke to him before he ran. I told him I don't think I'm going to support you, but when I see Congressman Alford, I think he's dedicated. I don't agree with a lot of Congressman Alford's positions, but the guy is committed to representing his district for sure.
Yeah. Well, let's get into some of this stuff then. I asked you to come on specifically for the Trump trial because you've been on both sides of a trial. Just in general, what do you make of what's going on in New York?
I have an interesting take on it because I'm trying to look at it through the view of a prosecutor. This is a state case. This is not unlike any other case that I tried as a prosecutor. And I'm looking at what the prosecution is doing in their order of witnesses, the order of putting evidence in. Because in trial work, you're just telling a story to the jury. If you think it's more than that, you're wrong. It's the theater of the courtroom, and the evidence has to get to those people, and those 12 people need to agree beyond a reasonable doubt and need to agree all together. Because you can hardly get 12 people to agree on where to go to lunch, let alone find someone guilty or not guilty. So as I'm looking at the trial, I'm trying to look at the evidence and try and keep out the politics, the spin, the sexual aspects of it, all the pizzazz of it too. So that's where I'm coming from. So I guess my first response to you is I've seen the ups and downs of the prosecution and the defense. I've seen witnesses come in that were good for the prosecution. I've also seen the defense come back on a cross-examination, make some great points for their side too. So if anyone says this is a case that's already decided, they're wrong. This case could go either way.
Okay. Would this or any of the current trials and all of the indictments against Donald Trump, would any of it be front and center if he weren't running for president?
Without a doubt, no way. Not at all. I will tell you that I believe every one of the cases, every one of the charges has merit and has some sort of factual basis to bring the charge. I will tell you that if he wasn't running for president, he wouldn't be facing those charges at all. So is that a politically biased reason to bring a criminal charge against him and the civil charge? Of course. But I could argue the merits of the case of there is a reason to bring these charges.
Okay. To me, that's a slippery slope. And, maybe the next time around, it's Republican districts that are indicting a Democrat for office.
Oh, we're in a terrible world,
trial.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
The shoe will be on the other foot.
It's a bad look, I think. So Michael Cohen is on the stand, and I guess he's the star witness. Had they identified what the crime is here in New York? What's the crime?
The crime is falsification of business records. And so,
which is a misdemeanor, which the statute of limitations has run out on.
Well, it hasn't on all of them. So there's 34 different business records they alleging that the president falsified. They're all misdemeanors unless there's an underlying felony involved in that. And they're alleging the underlying felony is election interference or campaign finance. Now, we know that Cohen actually went to jail for campaign finance violations, perjury, and that type of thing, involved in the same case. The prosecution has to prove that there's no question that what Cohen did, and he's been found guilty, been convicted, went to jail, is to put President Trump in that room and to make sure that and prove that he had an intent and to commit that crime.
Yeah. Well, of course, we heard Stormy Daniels, and we heard all the salacious testimony that she had, and I'm sure a lot of folks went to Stormy Daniels and Googled her, and boy, you can find lots of things out about Stormy Daniels.
Well, be careful with
Apparently, she's got a tattoo that runs all the way across here. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Well, now you do. Where do you think this ends up?
I don't know. I think we're going to. I think it's going to be wrapped up in the next 2 weeks. I don't think it'll go long.
Yeah.
I think they were anticipating it's going to be a several-month trial. It won't.
Yeah.
To speak to the Stormy Daniels thing, I think the prosecution went a little bit overboard in getting to the salaciousness of it. The fact is that she had some sort of relationship and she got paid is really the relevance of her case at all. I think that when they put the other issues in, it gets in front of the jury, maybe biases them a little bit more and against the defendant, and that might have been the reason too. But they allowed her to say certain things, and on cross-examination, she kind of took some hits too. So I don't know that the Stormy Daniels, her as a witness, did as well for the prosecution as they thought, because she's not as relevant to the facts of the case or proving the criminal intent of the case as she could be.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but NDAs are very common in the radio business. I mean, is this not just a basic NDA? It's like, we're going to give you 130 grand. We just don't want you to talk about this.
I don't think hush money is nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
NDA's nothing wrong with that. Was it done to make sure that it didn't get out and influence the election?
Okay.
And was any of that money used, campaign money, used to silence her to benefit the campaign?
Yeah. Well, the shoe on the other foot, and not to play whataboutism, but what I've heard, and maybe you can tell me whether it's true or not, is that Hillary Clinton was fined by the FEC for something very similar relative to the Steele dossier and what happened with Russian collusion. Is that true?
I do not know that. But
okay.
Again, maybe she was. And the Steele dossier is a whole different ballgame we can talk about too.
Yeah. But, then you've got the FEC apparently passing on this Trump thing. And, just from my perspective, from my side of the fence, it looks like this is a get Trump campaign any way we can. Where, Joseph Stalin was running the Soviet Union, show me the man, I'll show you the crime. That's what it seems like from my side is happening to Donald Trump.
Well, it's clear that the federal prosecutors passed on this. The FEC passed on it. It was too complex of a thing to link the former president to this. But what we have in this country, we have what's called prosecutorial discretion. Mm-hmm. You elect the prosecutor to do what they do. We have some problems with prosecutors around everywhere on whether they're making the right decisions in pursuing crimes. And there are a lot of Democratic prosecutors and Republican prosecutors that will charge someone based on politics and will let the other person that isn't involved in politics pass on that. This case clearly comes from a prosecutor that had an animosity towards President Trump and brought that with that in the background, but the facts merit bringing it. Now, the former president has his day in court, and he's getting it this week, and he gets to prove to that jury. But whether they decided to bring it just for political reasons is something they get to do, but there is some meat on this bone.
Okay. Well, we'll see where it all ends up here. The presidential election, at least I think it's pretty much set. Donald Trump for the Republicans, Joe Biden for the Democrats, and RFK Jr. somewhere in the middle. How do you handicap the presidential election?
Well, if the worm in his brain doesn't come into effect, that'd be a problem. I'll first tell you this. I had a conversation with some of my Republican friends this weekend, and I come from the point of view of our two candidates, Biden and Trump. Wish they weren't running. I wish both
I
of them
agree with you 100% on that.
We're not running.
Yeah.
And I'm of the opinion that if there was someone else other than Joe Biden running, I would pick that person and I would say, thank you, President Biden, for your service. You need to move on. I found on the other side of the aisle, though, I have too many people that think Donald Trump is the end all and that's it. And I'm puzzled by that. I'm puzzled by the fact that someone can't say, well, here's this young Republican that could do a good job. He might be better than Donald Trump. And I haven't seen that from the other side. And that's where I get puzzled. I think we all agree they both go away. It'd be great for us.
Yeah.
I think Joe Biden, there's a younger person that could take the spot Joe Biden. I found a lot of my friends on the other side say, no, it's only Trump, and Trump can only do that.
Yeah, I disagree with that. I think there are a lot of folks on the Republican side who could do that. Now, when you take the clown car away, as I like to say, when you take the clown car of Donald Trump away and you take the old guy on the other side away and we get to just policy issues, I look at just plain policy issues, and that's why I typically vote for Republicans, and that's why I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. I said it on the podcast. If he's the nominee, I'll support him. I'll hold my nose and go vote for him, because in a policy world, that's where I am. So you're on the other side. What are your top three, if you will, maybe top five policy issues why you would be more on the Democrat side versus the Republican side?
Well, first I'm going to speak to your position. That's where we got to be. We got to be able to say, well, Donald Trump's not my favorite guy as a Republican, but he's my guy, so I'm voting policy. That's where we're lost on that, and that's where we're fighting about people that are just so Trump end all be all. So I really respect that. We're not going to agree about a lot of stuff, but I respect the fact that that's why you're voting, and that's how we've been in Democratic and Republican politics all the time. We vote on policy. I believe, with my heart, that Joe Biden is one of the compassionate presidents we've ever had. I think the old guy really believes and feels he's doing a service to the country. I really believe he's for union, he's for working people. I think that women's rights are an important issue. I'm raised as a Catholic. I have my own Catholic beliefs, but I really believe that a woman has a right to choose. And I think leaving it to the states does not protect everybody equal rights across the country is what we're known for. I think the economy's getting better. Everybody's not feeling it. Everybody sees the gas prices up, food prices up, but I think the economy is getting better. And I think Joe Biden is not a charismatic Democratic candidate like a Barack Obama or something like that. He doesn't drive people to the polls. Young people aren't sure about what's going on. They think he's an old guy, and they like the pizzazz and the character of Donald Trump, and people are maybe voting for the personalities based on policies. And I hope that's not the case.
Yeah. My theory is the reason Joe Biden won last time is because there were enough people in the middle who hated Donald Trump. So it wasn't necessarily pro-Biden, it was anti-Trump.
You're exactly right.
In droves.
You're exactly right.
So, on my side of it, I look at the border. which I think is problematic, and I think Joe Biden contributed to that with his executive orders. I worry about energy. I worry about his dream that we're going to go on EVs when there's no infrastructure for it, and there's no demand for it yet. There are mandates that the car companies are going to do this, and they're bending the knee. I worry about foreign policy. I think, from my perspective, every decision Joe Biden has made since he became president has put this country in a less secure position. Iran, Russia, and China are my top three there. So those are all policy issues that have nothing to do with personality. And then you mentioned women's rights, and Kurt and I have this debate semi-regularly because Kurt is definitely in the anti-abortion camp. Now, like you, I'm a Catholic, and it goes against everything I believe in my faith. But unless the Republicans find a reasonable path to figure this question out, we're never going to win another national election.
I would hope so. I would hope that people come out and vote for policy. I hope they come out and realize this is not even about Donald Trump and Joe Biden in that relation. It's to, can you codify a Roe type thing? Can you get it passed through legislation and the next Supreme Court justice appointments? Where are they going to be on this issue? So it's hard to get people to vote on policy. I would tell you also, one of the reasons I'm more of a Biden guy is I believe his responses, and I would disagree on foreign policy. I think he reaches out to people, some experts in the field, and he makes some decisions based on that way. Whereas Donald Trump was more of a knee-jerk guy. And I will be voting for the more boring, collaborative, coordinated effort of looking at something than a knee-jerk chaos that Donald Trump brings.
Well, because we're dealing with Trump and Biden, Biden's 81 years old, and he's going downhill fast. Would you agree with that?
I cringe.
Yeah.
I cringe when he starts talking. I cringe when he's walking. He looks like an old guy.
4 more years?
I think, well, and I would argue that it's the people you surround yourself with. Right now, Anthony Blinken is over there, and he's trying to fix the world over the Mideast. And he's making some progress. So Joe Biden, all of his cabinet members are supportive of what Joe Biden does. Donald Trump's cabinet members, nobody wants to work for him, and they all don't like the way he did things. So, yes, 4 more years. Can he do it? I don't know. And I'll tell you what, and I'm not the first person to say it, I'm not really happy about my vice presidential candidate. I'm not really excited that it's
so you're voting for her. I mean, you get that. Father Time's undefeated.
Yep. And I think that it was a smart decision. I mean, I had some conversation with the Biden camp about it, about selecting her. I think it was good to get the women's vote. I think it was good to get the African American vote. I think she did well doing that. But I don't think she brings a lot of people to the election booth saying, oh, yeah, if Joe Biden passes, she's our next president. And that's a problem. And I was hoping we might take care of that, but it doesn't look like we're going into that with the same cast we had.
I think that's suicide on your side to do anything about that, because then you'll get the women and the African Americans rising up together saying you're being unfair.
You bet. And that's the decision that's been weighed. Like, yeah, we can't do that.
All right. So the college campuses, one of the other things we were going to talk about, obviously they've been a powder keg. And what I told you is what Carson Ross told me back in the day, is that my rights end where yours begin and vice versa. First of all, I think these kids are wrong. I think that if certainly the females and the gays that are involved in all this, if they went over to the Middle East and tried that, what would Hamas do to them? I mean, I always have that hanging out there. So they're supporting Hamas against one of our steadfast allies in the Middle East. So I think they're wrong. But the First Amendment tells me I have to defend their right to be wrong until they cross the line.
Well, it's a complex issue because even President Biden said that he said exactly what you said, until you commit a crime, and you can't do that. I don't know. Well, let me back up. Israel has the right to defend itself, and they've been one of our allies, and we should support them. And that's not changed, and shouldn't change. The traumatic terrorist thing that happened in October to them, they get to do that. What an issue the protesters are raising is that, can they go into Hamas with our support and just kill hundreds of thousands of people because Hamas is using it as a shield? What I would say to those protesters, because we agree there, I think they're wrong. I think that they're causing a crime. They're getting in the middle of college things, and they're not doing anything. They're not getting done. I would like to ask them, what would you like? What are you mad about? What are you protesting? And I think they're going to say, well, the United States is not doing enough for the ceasefire. Well, and I would say BS. Can we say BS on this?
Sure.
Yeah. Joe Biden, our Secretary of State, is over there trying to work on this ceasefire with Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist thing. They're not like working with regular people, and the president is trying to. Then he says today or yesterday, we're not going to give Israel any more weapons that would help you go into Hamas. Now we know that Israel has enough weapons to do whatever they want, but it's a symbolic thing saying we support you to defend yourself, but to go over there to I can't think of the name of it, Rafah, and do that, we don't support that. So whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, I don't see these protesters that are just creating chaos on our college campuses realizing the president in our country is trying to do something. We're doing everything we can. We don't run Israel. We don't run Hamas, but we're telling them what we want them to do, and we're in the center of getting Egypt and everybody on board to negotiate this ceasefire. So we agree about these protests. These kids are going too far. If they wanted to go over Hamas and see how they treated them, whoa, eye opener. They have the privilege of our constitutional rights to do it, and we should support them to be able to do it to an extent.
Okay. You brought up the Constitution, and one of the reasons I believe so strongly in what I believe in is the United States Constitution. And it troubles me when I see things on the Democrat side that run counter to the Constitution when things aren't working out their way. So Congress approves these weapons, and Joe Biden says, no, I'm not going to send them yet because I'm going to direct your policy, Israel. You can't go in there and get our weapons. I mean, is that okay?
I would disagree that it has any constitutional issue at all. The Constitution has made the executive the commander-in-chief of the war, of the military. And he decides where those goes. And he decides, just because Congress passes what we use the weapons for, things can change, and we need a president that isn't hand-strapped by Congress. If he needs to make a decision based on that, he should be able to. Again, he has the consequence of being voted out next time, too. But I don't think that's counter to the Constitution. I think it actually shows how we do have these balance of powers and checks and balances.
Okay, but there are other issues that we could talk about as well. Donald Trump got to appoint 3 Supreme Court justices. So there were folks on your side of the aisle that said, well, we need to pack the court and put more justices in there, even after Ruth Bader Ginsburg said 9 is the right number. It's not in the Constitution, but through trial and error, that's kind of where we are. Where are you on packing the court?
I'm against it. However, what has happened in the last 20 years, 10 to 15 years, and one party got in power, they would say, well, we ought to do it because we're not going to be in power again. And they have to realize they won't be in power. So I believe doing that is counterproductive. You could do it, stack the court, and now we have a different thing. But I think then you lose the majority in the Senate next time. You lose the presidency, and then we're doing something else. Now we're making the Supreme Court 15 or something. So I'm against that, and I think calmer minds did prevail on that. I think he had some extremists saying, "Oh, this is the way we do it."
Yeah.
I think people said that's not the way the country's supposed to run. It's not according to the Constitution to do it that way.
Well, and then we used to have the filibuster for federal courts, and I can't remember who got rid of that. It was Harry Reid got rid of that. And Mitch McConnell told him this will come back and bite you in the ass. And it came back and bit them in the ass. And so you've got 3 very conservative justices on the court who probably would not have passed if the filibuster was still around. So when I'm a conservative, and that means I like hanging on to things like the Constitution and the separation of powers. And I mean, you talked about the executive branch being preeminent. Article 1 of the Constitution is Congress. They are the preeminent power in the country. Presidents, through the course of our history, have taken more power away to the point where we really have almost a 4th branch of government now of unelected bureaucrats, Republicans and Democrats, depending on who's in the White House, and they're making law.
Oh, without a doubt. I would disagree that the Congress is preeminent. They come in the first article, but we have three branches of the judiciary, the legislative, and executive. Co-equal. And no one's better than the other. Now, I will tell you, in any executive branch, whether it's the presidency or the governorship or the county, you have bureaucrats that stick around, whether the new president comes in, and the claims of a deep state are really exaggerated. But there are bureaucrats that stick around, and they're like cockroaches, and you can't get rid of them. And the new president wants to come in, or new governor, and get rid of them, and he can do it for a little bit, but they're still going to be around, and that's problematic. Yeah.
All right. Anything else I didn't cover? I mean, this was a big umbrella to talk about politics today, but
we're getting heavy into the election season, campaign season. I know former President Trump would once get out of the courtroom and get to campaigning. I think he's got some really good news in the last couple of weeks with these federal cases. I think that the documents case is going to get delayed. That won't happen before the election. And it doesn't look like any of the other cases. The Supreme Court's still going to rule on presidential immunity. So that one's not going to go anywhere, January 6th. So he might have this one and maybe Georgia to face. But we'll get into the campaign, and only thing campaigns worry about is money. So we're going to see what happens with money. And I think Donald Trump was unstoppable in the Republican primary. He was not going to be beat. I think now we're going to get to the fact that now we're going to see what independent voters say. And does a criminal trial affect the independent voter when they're choosing between Biden and Trump as we go along? I think we're talking about fundraising. I think Joe Biden is raising more money than Donald Trump is right now, but that could change easily and quickly. So I'm watching that. I'm watching them fundraise. I'm watching what independent voters are saying and thinking now. We kind of know what they're going to think. You know, Joe Biden's too old. Donald Trump's too much of a jerk. I mean, that's what they're going to say. And the camps are there. The tribes are there. And it's what those independent voters, maybe suburban women voters, are they going to take a stance, and what's going to sway them?
Okay. You're not one of those Democrats who says if Donald Trump wins, it's the end of democracy as we know it. There will never be another election again in this country.
I don't deny that, but I'm definitely not stopping my feet. I think it's going to be problematic of Donald Trump. I think he has a lot of axes to grind, and a lot of people he's going to do some things to. He says he's going to be dictator on day one, and that's scary.
Well, you know what that means. He's going to tear up a lot of executive orders, just like Biden tore up executive orders on day one.
If that's what he was saying, I'd laugh and say that's good. But some of his things are scary.
Okay, I got to call you out on that before we let you go, because I hear that all the time on the other networks, on MSNBC and all that. It's the end of democracy as we know it. Name something that would happen that would be the end of democracy.
Well, I didn't say that. I said I didn't fully deny it.
Yeah.
But I think having him with an axe to grind and settling personal disputes as the commander-in-chief is problematic, because he directs the Department of Justice to do certain things. He has a lot of power as a president. And the president should be hands off and let the DOJ and the Attorney General do what they do. Whether you like Joe Biden.
Do you think that's happening now?
I think it is.
Okay.
I think it is. I think Joe Biden could have directed him not to deal with Hunter, but Hunter's going to get his. Hunter's going to be investigated. I think he has his hands off. And I think he could have been more involved. And my friends on the Republican side, you got to tell me, which way is this guy a duddering old idiot that is so with dementia he doesn't know what's going on, or is he this brilliant criminal mastermind that's doing all this? He can't be both. You got to pick one of them.
Well, we know he's 81, and the clock is ticking.
And he's going to fall down Air Force One. Every time he goes up and down, it scares the crap out of him.
That's why they have the baby stairs now, right?
Yeah.
There you go. Phil LeVota, criminal attorney, an attorney here in Kansas City, and also a former prosecutor of the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office. We appreciate your views, and I do want you to come back because, again, we need to get outside the echo chamber and need to hear both sides.
You bet. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, we want to thank Phil for being here. I think he's a good resource to get the other side from, and we can have that kind of conversation, that kind of give and take. I think that's going to be very important in the days and months to come. The podcast is brought to you in part by Royal Roofing and Solar. Man, with all the rain we've had, it's falling in buckets. How's your roof holding up? Is it time for a new roof? Let my guys at Royal Roofing and Solar take a look at it. And if this is your forever home and you want to find a way to get around those expensive electric bills, let them show you how solar can make a difference. We can turn your house into its own power generating plant. 816-540-7057. Royal Roofing and Solar is on the web two different ways, solarbyroyal.com and royalcontractingkc.com. They did the roof at my house, and they're ready to work with you on the roof at your house. I mean, you don't want some fly-by-night company. We get these hailstorms that come through, and all of a sudden they come out of the woodwork like ants. You don't want to do that. You want to go with a tried, true, tested company, and that's Austin Watterson's Royal Roofing and Solar. Dear friends of mine, and they'll take care of you.
Can I add something to that?
Sure.
Too? I know you follow Austin on Facebook, but he's been posting a lot about also looking for people to work. So in both Kansas City and Springfield, and then I know he's expanding down into some other states as well. So reach out to us or reach out to Austin or reach out on Royal Roofing, royalcontractingkc.com. If you or someone you know is looking for a job, it's steady work. There's a lot of opportunity for that right now too. So make sure that you keep that in mind.
A lot of roofs need to be replaced, especially with the storm damage that we've had in the Kansas City area. Something else that's a true fact, 10,000 people a day turn 65 in this country, and they don't know anything about Medicare. If you're approaching 65, I was at a Mother's Day party yesterday. My brother-in-law is turning 65, and he's like, oh, I got to go have that Medicare conversation. Have the Medicare conversation with my good friends Kirk Doris and Lori Hocker at Medicare Simplified KC. They can make Medicare, which is a government maze, understandable and simple for you. Over the last 10 years, they've helped thousands of people just like you understand Medicare and how it applied to their particular circumstances. It's not one size fits all. Why sit through a 2-hour Medicare seminar where most of the information they present won't pertain to you? Let's get it customized for you. Schedule with Kirk or Lori. They'll come to you. You can come to them, however it works out for you. Get the answers and know your options. 3600 South Nolan Road, Independence. On the phone at 816-701-6661. They're on the web at MedicareSimplifiedKC.com. The clock is ticking on all of us, including our presidential candidates who aren't getting any younger. We are 173 days, as this episode posts, until decision 2024 / the strangest election in our lifetime. Now, Kurt, you sat there quietly. I think you gave me an answer to a question I couldn't come up with once. But other than that, you sat there quietly while Phil had his take. What are your thoughts?
Well, I took notes. And, I want to say Phil is a very nice guy, and I want to be careful what I say because he's not here.
And we want him to come back.
Yeah, and we want him to come back. And I hope that he's watching this. Maybe next time we can set up 3 microphones instead of 2.
So it could be 2 on 1?
Yeah. Well, he mentioned that I think he's used to that.
He is used to that.
According to what he was saying about the radio show he used to do. So maybe we'll get another lib in here and we'll have 2 on 2.
Oh, boy.
Make it fair. But no, you're Dale, this, you can take this as a compliment or not, but you're a very agreeable person, I think, a lot of times. So there were some things that I think you probably could have, whether you chose to or not, pushed a little bit harder on. But one thing, just from the top, you asked why he's voting for Biden, and he mentioned abortion right away. And I think that that rings true. We've talked about it on the podcast, that seems to be the number one motivating issue for a lot of Democrats as to why they're voting for Biden. But then, the biggest thing, I don't want to ramble on too much, but there seemed to be sort of a disconnect with him between putting the responsibility with the president and not with the president. You mentioned Biden's age, and he agreed that was an issue and that he's, it's cringy, quote unquote, cringy to watch him. And then he said, well, it's not about that. It's about who you surround yourself with. So he's admitting that Biden has no control, that he's just somebody else is pulling the strings. That's what it sounds like to me, and then he's mentioning things about Trump, like, oh, he's off the cuff. He's things that I don't really agree with, but it's like, does the buck stop with the president or not? He's talking about foreign policy. The president needs more power because he's the one that controls the military, but obviously Biden is not in control of anything. So that seems to be a disconnect for me, to say the least. And then he also mentioned, which I thought was probably the most interesting part of the conversation towards the end, you asked him why he doesn't like Trump or why he's voting for Biden. He said that or what's dangerous about Trump, I guess. And he said that when he comes into office, he's going to use the office to settle personal disputes. And you kind of said, well, I was like immediately like, okay, like what? Like what personal disputes?
Yeah.
And I guess he sort of half mentioned the Hunter Biden thing, and he's like, oh, it's dangerous, it's dangerous for the president to use politics to settle personal disputes, Which is exactly what's happening right now. And
Yeah.
he admitted it earlier in the conversation when he
Right.
said, well, yeah, this Trump trial is obviously politically motivated.
Wouldn't be happening if he weren't running for
It
president.
wouldn't be happening if he weren't running for president, you know. And there, I made some other notes. The part that kind of I tried not to laugh out loud was his comment about Trump saying he would be dictator for a day, which was obviously a joke.
Yeah.
On a town hall.
And he's too smart to fall for that, right?
Really,
Yeah.
genuinely, he seems like a smart guy. And again, I don't want to insult him because he's not here, and
Right.
you know, that's not my intent. But that is just clearly low bar, you know, stuff. So that kind of stuff, like he said he's going to be dictator for a day. He says Mexicans are rapists. He says Nazis are fine people. I mean, we need to get past that because it's just BS and it's just very easily disputable. So that's a little disappointing. But otherwise, great guy, you know, great conversation.
Well, we'll have him back then.
Yeah.
Latest poll in 6 swing states has Trump ahead in 5 out of the 6. Michigan, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. Biden slightly ahead in Wisconsin. Joe Biden won all 6 of those states in 2020, and they are really going to be the key to winning the election this year. And how, you know, we've talked about this a lot, how the media has their hand on the scale. Maybe they've got their whole body on the scale for Joe Biden. They're doing it sometimes overtly and sometimes very subtly. Now, here's 2 stories that I have right here. They're very brief. One is the way the wire service written by NBC wrote the story. Now, I've told you many times I do the news on KFKF, and I have to rewrite their wire copy almost all the time. So this was the story, the way it was written. Hang on, I got it out of order here. Donald Trump is attacking President Biden for threatening to withhold weapons from Israel. Trump took to Truth Social early today to accuse Biden of siding with Hamas militants. In his words, just like he has sided with the radical mobs taking over our college campuses. Trump launched the attack after Biden said his administration would not supply weapons to Israel if it went through with its plan to invade the southern city of Rafah, blah, blah, blah. In the second post, Trump claimed that Biden was, quote, caving to the far-left pro-terrorist mobs because his donors are funding them, and that he is, quote, too weak to demand law and order. Now, here's how I rewrote it. See if you can get the subtle difference here. Former President Trump is criticizing President Biden for threatening to withhold weapons. I took the word attack out both times because don't you think that they're trying to inflame people? That this mean guy is attacking this poor old man, right?
Right.
That's how I took it. Maybe I'm taking that a step too far, but you know, I try and get these things neutralized the way the news ought to be neutralized instead of opinion based, and that to me is the difference.
Yeah, I mean, words like that, attack, is a very deliberate choice of words, obviously, and I'm sure that happens on many sides. You know, if you were going to read Breitbart or watch this podcast, for example,
Yeah.
you know, we probably do the same thing. But it is a very clear choice of language.
But see, this is what we ought to be debating, right? This would be a perfect question to debate between the 2 candidates for president. Not, you know, who's going to be a dictator for a day, not who basically has to wear Depends, and if you smell him, you know maybe he didn't get to the bathroom in time. I mean, these are not the things that we should debate on stage. This, we ought to debate on stage. I mean, Biden made the clear choice that Israel, you know, you're our ally, but if you go into Rafah to get those terrorists who hide behind civilians, I mean, it's a great day for Hamas. Hamas is pulling all the strings in this deal. All we got to do is hide behind the civilians, and the Americans won't give them any weapons. Wow. There's a choice. I mean, that's something that we ought to debate. And I personally think Donald Trump is right on the money. And you heard Phil LeVota say that just because they wrote the Constitution and put Congress number 1, that doesn't mean anything. They're co-equal branches. Really? Do you think the founders were like, gosh, who should be first? Should we do it in alphabetical order? Should we do this or that? I think they put Congress first for a reason. Because it's the representatives of the people meeting in Congress, and the executive's role, if you pull out just the Constitution, is to execute the laws passed by Congress. So we would disagree on that. And no, I didn't push back too hard because I want the guy to come back.
Right.
Okay. So President Biden was in Seattle to raise money. LeVota said it does come down to money for his reelection campaign. He flew out to Seattle on Air Force One and all of the other cars and things. Are those electric, by the way? You're showing the motorcade there. Those are big old Cadillacs. You think those are electric? What do you think?
I doubt it.
Is there a sail on it? Is there a wind coming off the coast? Yeah. So
there's a bunch of protesters too. That was kind of part of the clip.
Well, exactly. But he flew out to Seattle. He didn't make a speech because, let's face it, he can't make a speech. Even the Democrat who was on with us says it's cringeworthy when his candidate opens his mouth. That says a lot in my mind.
Yeah.
And, he returned back to the East Coast after the fundraiser. How much money was spent to raise this money?
Yeah, it was a private fundraiser, right? That's
Yeah.
my understanding.
So, I mean, the rules, and assuming that they're following the rules, is the campaign has to pay for the use of Air Force One and all that. But my point is, you're destroying the planet at a time when you're lecturing us to save the planet.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I don't care about that, but I think the bigger story is that he doesn't really have like he doesn't really have public support. He doesn't have enthusiasm. The people who are going to vote for him in November, the vast, vast, vast majority of them, 90% of them or more, are anti-Trump votes, as you mentioned in the conversation with Phil. And he can't have these public rallies because it doesn't look good for him. The crowds are much smaller. He's not charismatic. He can't speak. So they avoid that, and that's a bad look.
Well, let's contrast that with Donald Trump, who basically he's had to be in court day after day after day. And even LeVota knows that this wouldn't be happening if he weren't running for president. And so they're trying to keep him off the campaign trail, to keep things, to give Joe Biden an advantage. I love this visual. This is the visual from the rally that Trump had in New Jersey. Do you think Joe Biden could pull off anything like this?
Don't even have to answer. This was in Wildwood. Apparently 80,000 people showed up.
80,000 people. Think of it. It's like the Chiefs and Ravens game that's going to kick off the season this year.
Right.
And they're all there to see and root for and cheer on Donald Trump for another term as president.
Yeah. It's incredible. I mean, the guy, and this is another thing. I was going to comment on the Rafa situation because I disagree with that too, but we already moved past it. But the one thing that you guys were talking about that I definitely disagree with is, that it's just about policy. And it is a lot about policy, but energy, personality really does matter. And that's what separates Trump. I mean, that's what makes him a totally unique political figure in modern American history. It's not because he's more conservative than, Ted Cruz would have been as president.
Yeah.
It's because he has the charisma and the energy that really captures people's attention, and he's relatable. He talks like a normal person, and that's what I mean. The average voter is not somebody who is going to be like, okay, let me go down every single policy position and compare the two and look at the Democrat party platform versus the Republican Party platform and make a spreadsheet. They're not doing that.
I'm not trying to be a nerd here. Maybe I am. And I take your point, but that knife cuts both ways, because there are a lot of voters out there who think Trump's an asshole, and they're going to vote for an old guy who can't put a sentence together with the dumbest person ever to hold the vice president's office right behind him because they think he's an asshole.
Right.
So it does cut both ways.
Yeah, of course. But I think that goes to my point that it is about personality. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that they're right in making that assessment, but they are making that assessment. That's why they're voting for Biden. It's not because of, I think probably the biggest example against that would be the abortion thing, which we talked about. That is, there are a lot of people, I think, that are single issue voters for abortion. Just like maybe on the Republican side, there are a lot of people that are single issue voters for, say, the border or, inflation or things like that.
Yeah.
But
where I'll agree with you is, Ronald Reagan, in my opinion, the greatest president in my lifetime, could do that. He could be that charismatic figure who could give a speech, rally the base, rally the troops, rally America, but there weren't as many people on the other side who thought he was an asshole, which is why he carried 49 states in 1984.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't alive then, but my understanding is that there was a pretty concerted media effort, to
Always
slander
is.
him in a similar way that they're slandering Trump now.
Always is.
And I think we make the mistake on the right of kind of acknowledging that. Like, Phil was talking about how, Trump is, he's a loose cannon, he's off the cuff, he's totally like batshit crazy or something. Like, he didn't use those words, but that's sort of the language that we use when we talk about the guy. And I'm like, I don't grant that. I don't grant that at all, actually, especially that we've had him as president for 4 years.
Right.
He wasn't,
He didn't end democracy
he
then.
He wasn't, starting World War III.
Right,
In
right,
fact,
right.
he did the opposite.
Right.
You know what I mean? He's actually much more of a measured person than people give him credit for.
Oh, I completely agree with
Yeah.
you. And I would have taken Phil LeVota apart if I didn't want him to come back again on foreign policy, because even Robert Gates, who was, Obama's Secretary of Defense, said Joe Biden never made a right decision in foreign policy in 40 years. And he still hasn't made a right decision. Donald Trump had the Abraham Accords, where he's got countries who were so against Israel, they wanted to wipe him off the face of the earth. He got diplomatic relations going with those countries. So I give him a lot of credit for that. And then Biden comes in, he restarts the Iran nuclear deal and frees up some money for them, which they funnel to Hamas, which in turn gets an attack on Israel. So there's no doubt that Donald Trump is better on foreign policy than Joe Biden. No doubt at all.
Yep, agreed. And that was one thing that was brought up in the conversation too, was he was talking about the protesters on college campuses and they're screaming for a ceasefire. And he's like, well, the Biden administration, Blinken is out there working on a ceasefire. And I mean, he's not doing a good job. Let's just put it that way. And, Trump made a lot of deals in the Middle East, and he obviously exaggerates. He's like, on day one, I would have it signed on day one. But, I mean, he's really not that wrong. Maybe not day one, but maybe month one, maybe week one. It happened pretty quick.
First 100 days.
Yeah.
All right. Joe Manchin on a possible Trump presidency and what he says he told President Biden. This is an interesting take. Did you find the video on it? If not, I can relate it.
Yeah, so I have the clip from foxnews.com, but it's like the full segment, so I don't know exactly where it is in the segment, but I can pull it up.
Okay.
Tremendous makes it
After this commercial. We can't give them commercials. We got our own commercials.
Yeah, right. But yeah, if you want to tee it up, I'll
Well, the interesting thing to me was, he basically is laying the groundwork for a possible Trump presidency, and even telling Joe Biden that, hey, back in our day, JFK was president, and he said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And he basically accuses Biden of turning that on its head. And we've got to get to a point where people get off their ass and do something in this country, which I'm like, yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Manchin is kind of
well, he's not running again.
Thank you, Brian. Good to
Here
be
we
with
go.
you.
So see what you got.
Big inhale. Do you sometimes worry about the direction of your party?
Well, I'm not a Washington Democrat, okay? So when you say my party, I don't relate to any of this. And I have a lot of friends who aren't Washington Republicans. The parties have gone so extreme, Brian, and somehow we've got to bring the grand old party, make it grand again, and make the Democrat Party responsible again. And I think they both lost their ways, and they're just listening to their own chatter here in Washington. But none of this makes sense. We don't live our lives like this. I can tell you in West Virginia, none of this would make sense to them whatsoever. They're going to protect their families. They know what's best. They want input with their families, and they should have it.
Where do you stand, Senator, on this cutting off and delaying of Israel aid at a time in which they're at war, clearly responding to the October 7th attacks?
I was asked about that this morning, and I said it's just wrong for us to engage in there. We have allies who are with us 99% of the time. Do we agree all the time? No, but none of us do. But they have been proven allies. Whether it be Israel, now with Ukraine, whether it be our NATO allies in Europe, we're going to be there and defenders of freedom. And when they're barbarically attacked, we're going to defend them. But now making decisions on what you can and what you can't use, you got to do the our way or no way at all, that's not who we are, and that's not what we should be doing. I have said, I've been asked today about, and I've said openly that I think it's wrong. I think that
Little indigestion.
We can sit down and work.
Yeah, bomb those kids. We can't tell them what to do. Fuck them.
Language warning.
Oh, God, that really irks
and
me.
I told my wife we were going to talk about this, and she says, well, like my wife talks, she's like, Manchin votes with Biden 99% of the time. All right, fine. So there you go. Moving along, can we move along?
Yes.
All right. Maybe it's time for a colonoscopy. You haven't even eaten that cinnamon roll over there just yet. But
I'm keeping it there so that I can savor it, in fact.
yeah. Want to smell? Want to put it on camera? Yeah.
Look at how
that came from Grandma's Office Catering. Maybe they should sponsor the podcast.
Yummy.
Yeah.
See that? Wow.
Yeah. And just think, after you have your colon blow, that's one of the things that you can have. But first have the colon blow if you're 45 or older. And one of the folks that we work with here at KFKF, I called her about a problem that we were having at the station, and she's dealing with it as best she can. And then she goes, I'm about to go in for my colonoscopy, but I'm doing the best I can here. So, we work even through colonoscopies at this radio station and on this podcast.
Not literally while it's happening. Hopefully.
No. While it's happening, you're taking a nice nap, and Dr. Taramina is up there with a hose or whatever, and he's getting whatever polyps might be in the way. The chances are you'll have a clean whistle, but if you do it at 45, we can get in front of colon cancer. Colon cancer will kill you if we don't catch it early. That's why 45 is the new 50, as cancer rates are continuing to grow because of what we eat, what we drink, what's in the environment, who knows. But cancer is getting younger and younger and younger. So if you're 45, schedule your colonoscopy. Let's get ahead of this. Dr. Mark Taramina at Midwest GI Health and Wellness, they'll take care of you. It's full service in Lee Summit. You do not need a doctor to recommend you for this. They can schedule it. And if you need the upper GI, they can do that while they're in there as well. You just have to go through the prep. You take a nice little nap. Dr. Taramina will wake you up and say, hey, clean bill of health, see you in 10 years. Or we found some polyps, we're going to send them off. But even if it's a problem, we can get ahead of it and we can fix it. So that's why early detection is key and why Midwest GI Health and Wellness needs to be your call. 816-836-2200. They're on the web at MidwestGIHealth.com. And then, of course, after you do that, then you can go see our friend Jim Dingman and have some pizza. They'll pile the toppings high. One of my friends who lives she's from Kansas City, but she lives in Houston, came back for a visit with her family, and her first stop was Fun House Pizza.
Nice.
It's one of those things, when you come back home, you want to go to the things that you know. And Funhouse Pizza is known as a Kansas City institution for the awesome pizza they have, the fun atmosphere, the cold drinks. You got a party coming up. Kids love Funhouse Pizza. And if you like your toppings piled high, you want a Funhouse Pizza. They have 2 locations, 50 Highway in Lee Summit, 7 Highway in Blue Springs. That's Funhouse Pizza. Our friend Jim Dingman, you mentioned employees. He's always looking for people to come work for him. In fact, somebody reached out to me and said, I need to find my kid a job. Where should I send him? I said, send him to Jim Dingman.
Yep. 100%.
He'll pay them well, and they'll get a work ethic that they wouldn't get in most places. Jim Dingman, of course, a Marine. He'll shape them up. And if you're going there for lunch, make sure you pull your pants up because it's important to Jim Dingman. Which takes us to the Boy Scouts of America. Were you a Boy Scout?
No. I was not.
Not even like a Cub Scout, a Weeblo?
A Weeblo? What's that?
What's the next level up from Cub Scouts?
I don't know.
A Weeblo.
Yeah. I don't know. No, I was not. I'm a big outdoorsman, but it kind of came naturally.
This would be like a no-brainer for you to be a Boy Scout. Huh? Interesting.
Nope.
Believe it or not, I was a Boy Scout.
Really?
And I'm not an outdoorsman. I was a Cub Scout, and then we moved around a lot. I skipped the Weeblo level entirely, and then when we got situated again, I went back and I was old enough to be a Boy Scout, so that's kind of where I started. And like a lot, because the funnel, it's like country music stars. The funnel is huge at the top and very small at the bottom. And it's the same thing for scouting, because the funnel is way up here for boys who get into scouts and now girls, which we'll get into, and everything in between. And then the funnel for Eagle Scout is really small. And when you get to be 15 or 16 years old and, girls come into the equation and sports comes into the equation and wanting to drive a car comes into the equation, many boys and now girls, I guess, decide they're going to go off and do their own thing. So Scouts started letting girls in to scouting, right?
Yeah.
And for a while, they were scouting BSA. They kept the Boy Scouts of America language in there, but now they're running up the white flag, and starting in February, it's going to be Scouting USA.
Yeah, October, the story that I found, the Boy Scouts say they will now admit girls. Here's what that means. This is from October 11th, 2017. So that's when they made the switch on letting girls in. But then we do have this clip. This is the new clip that's been going around of the CEO of the Boy Scouts, now just Scouting or whatever it's called. Let's hear what he has to say.
Scouting America.
Scouting America. All right.
Sends this really strong message to everyone in America that they can come to this program, they can bring their authentic self, they can be who they are, right, and they will be welcomed here. The argument that I make with the people that say, well, I always like Boy Scouts of America or BSA, why do we have to change? Go, membership is at historic lows, right? Part of my job is to reduce all the barriers I possibly can for people to accept us as an organization and to join. Sends this really strong message to everyone.
That's the clip.
So membership is at an all-time low. So you know what's really popular right now?
Yeah.
All the gay stuff. So if you're they them or something like that, come on in.
Yeah, come on in. Scouting at its peak in the 70s, there were like 5 million scouts.
Damn,
when it was
that's
just
a lot.
Boy Scouts, and now it's down to like 1 million.
700 billion and $1,300 billion.
And really, I mean, what's the need then for the Girl Scouts? When I was a little boy, you had Brownies and Girl Scouts. Mm-hmm. And on the other side, you had Cub Scouts, Webelos, and Boy Scouts. Mm-hmm. What's the point of any of it right now, right?
Well, maybe the Girl Scouts, I don't know much about them, but maybe they'll try and maintain a more traditional route.
Well, wait a minute. Why? Whoa, time out there, hero. What if a boy decides he wants to be a Girl Scout?
Well, he's not allowed. Sorry.
Yeah. And
plus they have the cookies. I mean, that's what everyone wants from the Girl Scouts, right? They have the cookies. You go to the grocery store. They're set up out front. You're like, okay, I'll buy some shortbreads. I'll buy some Thin Mints, whatever.
Yep. So, I don't even know where I was going to go with that.
Maybe that's what did the Boy Scouts, and they didn't have like a product. They didn't sell. What did the Boy Scouts sell?
Trust me, I bought so much Boy Scout popcorn over the years, and
popcorn
and different stuff like that. Oh my gosh.
I didn't even know about it. That sounds like a marketing issue. Maybe they weren't prominent enough with their sales.
And they're going to settle on Scouting America. The way we go on this country, it's a very slippery slope. When is it going to be? Well, you can't use the word America in it. That's jingoistic.
Yeah, or scouting. Scouting is reminiscent of colonization.
I know. I mean, what are we scouting? Who are we scouting?
The Europeans scouted the Americas, and then they genocided and decimated the native people. So you can't use that either.
Right. So,
So what is it going to be called?
I don't know that it's going to be called anything. It'll probably end up disbanding, and we just won't have it anymore.
It'll just be like a series of clicks
But I can tell you that I proudly still have in my collection of stuff somewhere my 40-plus-year-old Boy Scouts uniform, and I'm not going to change the patches. Nice. It's still going to say Boy Scouts of America.
How many merit badges did you have?
Not enough.
Huh.
And my stepson was on Eagle Path, right? And he's now 15, almost 16, and my wife told me he's done with scouting. Mm-hmm. So it happens. That's why that funnel is real small at the bottom. And you think about all the great Americans through the years who have been Eagle Scouts. I'm not one. He's not going to be one, apparently. You didn't even start. So,
right.
I mean, it's definitely a very select group.
Well, that's kind of like when the rubber hits the road with this kind of stuff. And he mentioned it in that clip, at least the reason that he's giving for making this change is to be more inclusive because their numbers are down. And it's like, okay, do you really think that these, disenfranchised or marginalized people, quote unquote, are going to just start joining the Scouts now because he said so. No, of course not. What it's really going to do is it's just going to alienate the people who are still left who haven't already quit. Now all those people are going to quit. So you're going to go from less to fewer to none.
Yep.
Is what that's going to do.
That's the way it's going to be. Then you grow up and you get a job and you go find a house. And if you need a house, you got to go with our guy, Michael Schroer. You can reach him on the phone. A couple of different phone numbers I'll give you here. 816-783-5800. Okay, I think that's the main office, real estate, Remax Heritage Real Estate Office in Lee Summit. You can also get him on his cell. We'll give out his cell phone. What the heck? He's a real estate guy. He wants to sell you a house. 816-520-9342. No matter what stage of life you're in, if it's your first home, my oldest son and his wife just bought their first home. Your forever home, which I'm not quite there yet. Maybe land to build your dream home. I was talking to Phil LeVota about this. He bought a bunch of land, and he's going to build his dream home.
90 acres, man. That's awesome.
Testing the relationship with his wife of 24 years. Mm-hmm. Been there, done that, and got a T-shirt. Whatever you're looking for when it comes to real estate, Michael Schroer's been in real estate here in the Kansas City area for 35 years. He's a native, and he always puts his client's best interests first. You're number one. Licensed in both Missouri and Kansas. You can find him at 816-783-5800, 816-520-9342. He's our official real estate guy here at Dale Carter's America. All right, it's the end of an era. General Motors will shut down the Chevy Malibu. One of my first cars was a 1970 Chevy Malibu. And now Malibu is going to be no more. The Fairfax plant in Kansas City will shut down for nearly a year to retool for the Chevy Bolt to meet the new federal mandates. So you want to play the video first or get to my questions?
I'm playing it in the background. He's just saying the same thing.
Yeah. So, really? Where's the demand? When a new iPhone comes out, there's demand, right? Millions of people want the new iPhone. When Morgan Wallen tickets go on sale for Arrowhead, everybody wants Morgan Wallen tickets. Toughest ticket to get in town. Who's lining up to buy an EV?
I mean,
some buy them. I get that.
Yeah, people are buying them for sure. If people weren't buying them, they wouldn't be making so many, or at least as many. They'd probably still be making them due to the upcoming mandates and things like that.
Yeah.
But I don't personally know many people that drive electric vehicles, but maybe it's a upper class, rich people thing. But people I know like myself drive old beat up cars. We drive them till we can't anymore.
You got to like Joe Biden. I mean, Phil LeVota said that he's for the everyman. Of course he is. He's for giving student loans for rich people. Rich people who are driving EVs are getting tax breaks that you and I are paying for.
I think $10,000 on Tesla is what they have now.
He's for the everyman. That's what's going on here. So I would argue that there's no demand for these things. Not no demand. There is some demand, but on the demand curve, I still think it's 95.5 gas-powered versus EV, and maybe that 5 is high. Ooh, that looks like my car I had. Is that a 70? Mine was silver.
It doesn't. I can't see. But one thing I just looking at this picture. I mean, cars used to look so much better than they do now.
Oh,
too.
yeah.
I mean, this is a beautiful automobile right here. Look at that thing.
I know. Mine was silver. Had the same kind of I think that's a black vinyl roof.
I love they had the long flat hoods.
Oh, yeah.
And the kind of flat front ends with the big headlights. I mean, what happened? Ugh.
Well, I'll tell you what happened to mine. I bought it used. It was like I had mine in 1980 and it was a 1970, so it was a 10-year-old car at that point, and it had been wrecked once. I didn't know that, and it was like filled in with Bondo. And when I hit the Toyota that stopped in front of me, it crinkled like Reynolds wrap. And I wanted to fix it because I thought it was a cool car. So I went to a junkyard and I couldn't find the doghouse. You know what the doghouse of a car is, right? The fenders and the front.
Okay.
Yeah. So and this is going to blow your mind because I know nothing about cars. But I went to a junkyard and I got the doghouse for a 1969 Malibu. Guess what? The holes didn't match up. So I put it on as best I could, and I still drove the damn thing. And it would go down the road, and it would rattle like you wouldn't believe. But it was my Malibu, and now you can't get a Malibu. You won't be able to, because they're going to shut down production of the Malibu at the Fairfax plant so they can make all those Chevy Bolts that you're lining up to buy. So there's the demand, which I think is an issue, and there's the infrastructure. If we got to Joe Biden's dream and there were 100 million EVs running around, where would you charge them?
I mean, there's not very many places. There are some, but
and can you imagine? We talk about this a lot, but can you imagine the paradigm shift that you're going to have to go through here? Where now, when my Mazda CX-5, because I gave up on Detroit, and that was for me raising the white flag. First time in my life I ever bought a foreign car. And it's like, Detroit's not listening to me. They're not listening to what my demand is. You know what? Japan is listening to what I want. So I got a really cool Mazda CX-5, and when it runs out of gas, I stop at a Quick Trip, right? I put the thing in there, and 5 minutes or less, I'm out of there. Mm-hmm. What's going to happen with these EVs? You got 45 minutes to sit around? What's that going to do to productivity?
Got to start putting beds in the back of them so you can take a nap while you're waiting for your car to charge.
All right. So if you're wondering why Americans are moving away from American-made vehicles, maybe now you know. And I just wonder because, these car companies have to factor in these decisions. So I wonder if even a change in the White House to Trump is going to put an end to this silliness, or they're building out for 5 to 10 years in the future, and even a Trump presidency can't stop this nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is from the government. Obviously, there are these mandates, there are these goals that are being put out by the EPA, by the Biden administration, but there's also, it does seem to be that the car manufacturers themselves are moving in that direction. Part of it must be because of the tax incentives and the rebates and things that they get, because they can save money on their production costs and they can sell them for cheaper, so they can, compete with the gas vehicles, even though they're more expensive to produce. So I'm sure that's part of it. Maybe if we got rid of that, things would change. So who knows?
Well, I'm going to get out my crystal ball here and make a prediction here. This will ultimately fail. And when it fails, Detroit's going to go, hey, we were just doing what you told us to do. Who's going to bail them out? Get out a mirror. Because it's you, it's me, it's Kurt. That's who they're going to come to. No matter how deep a hole we're already in, they're going to come to us to bail them out.
We bailed them out before.
Oh, exactly. And we'll do it again, I suppose. So no matter what you drive, Bob Watson's going to get you the insurance that you need. We all have cars, got to have them insured. You got your house, you got to have that insured. When you bundle those two things, you can really save with surprisingly great rates at State Farm. And when you need a State Farm agent to take a look at your situation, Bob Watson's your man. 7th and Main in Blue Springs, you can find him on the phone at 816-229-7878. He's got a great staff there in Blue Springs who will take care of you. The test of an insurance company is not necessarily the low dough rate that you can get. It's who answers the phone when you call, when you need them. And that's why they say, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Auto, home, life, commercial insurance, boats, licensed in both Missouri and Kansas. Bob knows what he's doing. He's been a State Farm agent, one of the best in the country, for 50 years. So when you need insurance, make sure you call my friend, Bob Watson. All right, we leave you with this. We talk a lot about Trump and Biden, but there are actually 3 national candidates running. And it's funny, I always thought when the referees will tell you in a football game that when both coaches are yelling at you, maybe you're doing the right thing. And I know there are some things you like about RFK Jr., right?
Oh, Les, he's been coming out of favor, honestly.
Okay. So the Democrats hate him. They absolutely hate him because any vote that he takes probably doesn't come out of Donald Trump's stash. It comes out of Joe Biden's. And Donald Trump has been publicly saying, this guy is not helping. So he wants it to come down to just Trump and Biden. But now we know more about RFK Jr. Isn't this interesting? He claims, and we know he's got speech issues. We've played clips from him before, right?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's heard him speak. I can find clips, but...
Yeah. Well, he claims a worm ate part of his brain.
Yeah.
Is that a thing? Do worms eat part of your... I mean, I get that when you're in the ground, the worm's going to get, like a buffet. But, just standing upright and mobile, does a worm get in your brain?
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says doctors found a dead worm in his brain. So, yeah.
So it ate until it exploded, or what goes on there? I really don't know. I'm not a worm expert.
After struggling with severe memory loss and brain fog, doctors became concerned when one of his brain scans showed a dark spot, which neurologists believe was a brain tumor. However, before a scheduled surgery to remove the suspected tumor, another doctor at New York Presbyterian Hospital told Kennedy that they believed the mass was actually the remains of a dead parasite. Kennedy said in the deposition that the dark spot on his brain scans were, quote, caused by a worm that got into my brain and ate a portion of it and then died, per the Times. He noted that he isn't positive how he contracted the worm, but believes it happened during a trip to Southeast Asia at the time. Yeah, there we go. That makes
There you
sense.
go. Well, that's why you don't go to Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
I mean, we watch air disasters a lot, and it's amazing that a lot of the crashes happen in Southeast Asia. So Jen and I are always marking off. We're not flying that airline.
Right.
Not flying that airline. So here's my thing. First of all, a public service message from the podcast that cares. When you drink the bottle of tequila, do not eat the worm at the bottom. That is not food.
I think that's a different kind of worm.
Is that a different kind of worm? Not a parasite?
No. The worm they put in the tequila bottle is just a regular,
Just a
earthworm.
regular old worm.
Yeah.
Which you could probably eat and it'd be okay.
Yeah.
I
wouldn't recommend it. I mean, it's still gross, but it's not gonna crawl into your brain.
All right. Well, I told you I'm not a worm expert, so there you go. But I will say this, and I know you get on me and you say nobody cares about the boring policy, blah 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 blah. But when you peel it all back, the choice for America moving forward, in my opinion, is crystal clear. And that's why I'm on the Trump train. And I told you I would be, right?
Yeah.
I said if he's the nominee, when you peel it all back, what do I believe in? What's important to me? Because I don't get up every morning and say, gosh, I wonder what Donald Trump said. I need to hear what he said so I can agree with it.
Right.
I'm not wired like that. And if you're wired like that, that's the wrong way to do it. And if you're wired like that on the other side, that's the wrong way to do it. Have principles that you believe in, right? And then when you hear these guys on both sides, decide which one is in your camp. And I know which one's in my camp. So until next week, this is Dale Carter's America.
The views expressed on Dale Carter's America are Dale's and Kurt Wheeler's. They do not necessarily reflect the views of KFKF or Steel City Media. Comments can be sent to dalecartersamerica@gmail.com. Check back for weekly episodes. Subscribe, spread the word, and give us a 5-star review. Thanks for being a part of Dale Carter's America.